a lot has been going on with the NHR. To provide context, because there's still a lot of people coming in to Portugal for the first time, and they're hearing about NHR and they're not too sure about what it is. Could you provide a bit of history as to where this NHR originated and what was the intent of this piece of legislation?
Of course. So the NHR was approved in 2009. It was a very hard time from an economic and financial standpoint. We had a subprime crisis. So the purpose of this regime, we got it very heavily here with a lot of issues with the budget. And ultimately, we had to call the IMF. It was a serious crisis back in Portugal. So what happened was the regime was approved in 2009, and the purpose was to attract investment to Portugal, but also to attract people that had specific skills and essentially allow Portugal to become more competitive in an international setting. So it was approved within the context of other benefits that wanted to attract high net worth individuals and people with specific, higher education, specific skill sets that could help the country. So 2009, it was approved. It took us a while to get the momentum, but after 1 or 2 years, things started snowballing, and the regime worked very well in the beginning for pension income. So a lot of retirees moving to Portugal. And in case of pension from past private employment, there was no taxation in Portugal, and there was no taxation at source also. So it was a double non-taxation. It was very nice. So in the first part of the program, we got a lot of retirees from all over. A lot of people moving from France, from other European countries, and moving to South. Portugal is a very nice country to live, warm, welcoming. So it was, and it was still within Europe for most. It was easier to accomplish the relocation. But the regime also worked very well in respect of passive income, because essentially, aside from pension income, what the regime had sort of a bifold solution for income flowing from outside of the country. We would apply the tax exemption essentially as a method to relieve double taxation. But because of the way the tax treaties work and the OECD model works, in some cases, there is a reduced withholding at source. That is the case of interest and dividends or royalties in most of the tax treaties. And that would allow a small withholding tax that people tend to consider acceptable. So 10, 15%, in some cases 5%, in some cases even 0%. And no additional taxation would arise in Portugal to those sorts of income. So it was easy. People would still keep their corporate structures outside. Most of these people would have their businesses for their whole lives or half of their lives. So they were not just relocating the entire corporate structure. They would be relocating them personally, retiring, changing their lives, working remotely, and they would still get this passive income with a very nice overall tax burden, all things considered. So it was very interesting. So it was one piece of one leg of the regime. The other leg was for employment and self-employment income derived from activities of high value added. In the cases where those were not exempt, would apply a flat tax of 20%. Now, if you compare it with some countries, the 20% is not too good, but European countries, I would say even the United States, a 20% flat tax on employment and self-employment income, it is very interesting. There was obviously nuances, things we had to plan, but it was easy to explain, easy to apply, and after a few years, the tax authorities adapted the formalities and the way to apply, and it was very easy. So you would essentially just change your tax residency to Portugal. It's not an artificial regime. You had to change your tax residency. But then after that, you could apply. It was very easy. There was very little room for the tax authorities to refuse the request, and typically we had a final decision on 1 or 2 business days. It was easy to do. Within that context, obviously, the statistics are not completely updated, and by the end of 2023, for instance, there were a lot of people moving. But I think overall, there were around 74,000 newcomers to Portugal benefiting from the regime. I think I used the word was not very accurate, not newcomers, because in fact the regime applied to foreigners moving to Portugal, but also to Portuguese that spent some time abroad and were returning home. That was also an interesting point of the regime, because we are hearing a lot of complaints from companies saying it is not, and from young people finishing their bachelor degrees and master degrees saying it's not interesting to stay in Portugal because of the tax of the tax framework and because of the work conditions and everything. So a lot of people immigrating to outside of Portugal. So there was a chance to come back with a very interesting regime. So this worked well until October 2023.